All righty. Good evening, everybody, and welcome into our March session of the Civic Awareness Series in partnership with the League of Women Voters of Palatine, Barrington, and Schaumburg areas. All right, I remembered the full title this time. My name is Chris Corrigan. I'm your Adult Programs Coordinator here at the Schaumburg Library. I'm so happy to be continuing this partnership with our local league and sharing all this wonderful information with all of our patrons. And I know we have some people even outside of our service area who are taking advantage of our Civic series. So thank you so much for coming and staying engaged and educated with us. Before I turn things over to the League of Women Voters, just a few friendly, I can see myself over here on my tablet and I don't like that. Just a few friendly Zoom reminders for everybody. Your cameras and microphones on Zoom have been turned off. If you have any questions that you would like asked to either of our panelists during the program, please feel free to just throw those in the Q&A and our moderator will happily ask those. If you're in person and want to ask a question, you should have gotten a little index card with a pen. If you didn't, throw your hand high in the air and my friend Terry over here will make sure you get that. She'll collect questions from you guys as you go. So once you have a question on your card, you can throw it in the air. She'll bring them up to our moderator and make sure your in-person questions are getting asked as well to our two panelists. Back to our online audience, you'll see closed captions have been enabled for your convenience. You can turn those on or off as you wish using your Zoom toolbar. I already see a question and I actually know the answer to that one. And yes, this is going to be recorded, and if you're registered, you will get a link to the recording after the program. So don't worry, we like to make sure this information stays accessible. There's actually an entire playlist on Schaumburg Library's YouTube page with all of our previous civic awareness programs. So if you want to go back and check through some of the other topics we've gone over the past about 2-ish years now, we have those available to you. I think I've gone a little out of order, so make sure I've hit all the things online, got your cameras, microphones off, how to ask questions. There will be a recording, closed captions for our in-person audience. If you need a restroom during the program, they're located right out this door. Ladies is right here, gentlemen's is just a door further. There is a water fountain in between the two. If you're at home, I hope you know where the washroom is. Without further ado, I've taken up far too much time already. I'm going to turn things over to, the League of Women Voters and our panelist, Vicki Martin. So Vicki, come on up.
Good evening and welcome to How to Have Your Voice Heard. This is this month's topic of the Civic Awareness Series hosted by the League of Women Voters. My name is Vicki Martin. Several of you have said, where do I know you from? It's probably from our candidate forums, which we also had here at the library. Tonight I'm here with Terry Gazowski. Where's Terry? Raise your hand. She's the one picking up questions. She is one of the chairmen, along with Janet Sonoyka, who wasn't able to be here today. And Terry and Janet and Chris are the people who make the Civic Awareness Series possible. They work very hard on this, and we are very grateful to them. We also want to be sure and thank the Schaumburg Library, Chris, and everybody else here who sets up all the audio-visual equipment and makes all of this happen for us. If you're new to the series, here's a little bit about the League of Women Voters. We're a nonpartisan political organization. And while we take positions on social and political issues, we never support or endorse a candidate. Anyone can join or support the League in our mission of promoting civic engagement, voter education and registration, and advocacy on various current issues. We're over 100 years old, but welcome the energy of all ages and genders. You can learn more about the League and participation through our website, www.lwvpalatinearea.org. Upcoming events like our next civic awareness events will be on there, as well as other things. And there's also plenty of information on how to vote on April 1st. If you have a question about the League, you can also leave that in the chat and somebody will get back to you regarding that. So again, tonight's topic is how to have your voice heard at the state level. And this evening, we're going to hear from two experts, State Senator Laura Murphy and Kristen Kern, Federal Policy and Advocacy Manager for the League of Women Voters. A little bit about Senator Murphy. Born into a middle-class family in Park Ridge, Senator Murphy Graduated from Illinois State University with a bachelor's degree in political science. She spent the last 20 years as an active member of the Des Plaines community, including 8 years as an alderman in the city's 3rd ward. Senator Murphy has over 2 decades of experience in healthcare and social services management. And as a member of the Illinois Liquor Control Commission, she worked to educate youth on alcohol and tobacco prevention. Senator Murphy was appointed to the Illinois State Senate in 2015 to represent the 28th State District. That district neighbors O'Hare International Airport and includes all or parts of Arlington Heights, Des Plaines, Elk Grove Village, Hanover Park, Hoffman Estates, Mount Prospect, Des Plaines, Rolling Meadows, Roselle, and Schaumburg. She's a very busy woman. In 2020, she was appointed Deputy Majority Leader of the Senate, and then in 2023 was appointed Assistant Majority Leader. She also serves as the chair of the Committee of Executive Appointments and as a member of the Committee on Appropriations. Her working class background and previous professional experience inform her views on government as an entity that should work toward the betterment of the people and reinforce her belief in the importance of education, public safety, and fighting corruption and waste in state government. And I should have printed that in larger font. Our other speaker tonight is Kristen Kern. Nice big print here. Kristen is the Federal Policy and Advocacy Manager at the League of Women Voters. In this role, she supports the League of Women Voters of the U.S. advocacy goals, works with federal elected officials and agencies to shape legislation and regulation to align with League policy positions, and liaises with the League of Women Voters of the U.S. Federal Lobby Corps. She also consults with League members through federal action requests to approve advocacy actions taken by the state and local leagues at the federal level. So please welcome both our speakers. So now I'm going to welcome Senator Murphy to the podium to give us her professional opinion on how to make our voices heard.
Oh, well, thank you. Okay. Well, thank you for having me tonight. Thanks to the Schaumburg Library, who always engages in civic involvement. So I really appreciate all. Just so you know, and not only Schaumburg, but a number of libraries in our community allow us to come in as legislators. We set up a table like on a 6-week revolving cycle. So if constituents can't make it to our offices, then they can come see us at the library if they're doing their daily visits to the library anyways. And not only myself, but the congressman's office, the Cook County Commissioner's office. So I appreciate that. It's a very welcoming thing that the library affords us. So I want to thank you all for being here tonight. And particularly, I want to thank you for making your league thrive, because we're not seeing that happen all over the Northwest suburbs. Unfortunately, this election cycle, a number of leagues have folded, particularly in the eastern part of my district, or they couldn't hold candidate forums because certain candidates refused to participate. So I appreciate that you had, I believe you said 19, or Barb had 19. Okay. 719, it was wonderful because it's such an important service that you provide voters. I'm getting tons of calls of people asking me, where can I find information on a candidate? Because there really is nothing on a candidate. Even if you do all your due diligence research, the only criteria in Illinois is that you be a registered voter and that you, in some cases, live in the district you represent. And then you go out and collect signatures. That's the only requirements to be on the ballot. You don't have to share who you are, what your beliefs are, unless voters demand it. And the league and groups like yourselves help demand that out of candidates. And I think that's really an important function. So that's my short segue into how do you reach your elected officials? What was the best way?
How do you make your voice heard?
How do you make your voice heard and advocate for your communities? Here's a great start, because this is an opportunity for you to participate in a forum that lets people hear what your concerns are, let your voices, you take that, you share it with your neighbors, and that's how we get information out. You also can reach out to your legislators and any elected official, not just legislators, but any elected official. I probably got more phone calls as an alderman, or got stopped in Jewel. My grocery shopping went till often 3 hours at a crack because people do stop you. But that's something that we sign up for as an elected official. And I think that that's a standard that every elected official should have, that you are accessible and accountable to the voters. Because whatever area you choose to get involved in, that is the requirement. So that's another way that you can make your voices heard. You can do that same thing in any group that you get involved in. If it's a book club, if it's your church group, if it's your any social group that you participate in, all of those are avenues for you to hear your voice heard. You might have a special interest. You might want to advocate for those with special needs. And so you're involved in that community, and then you can raise your voice not only to the other people that are around you, but to the administration there, and all of it then should come to an elected official. And then you can increase that level, whether it be your local elected officials, whether it's your county, your state, or your federal. Everybody wants to hear your voice, wants to know what you're thinking, wants to be responsive to their constituency. So any avenue you choose is the right avenue. Kristen, you want to, Kristen, would you like to introduce yourself and start?
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Senator Murphy.
Oh, we can't hear you. I think I have to unmute her. I don't know how.
It's okay. Technical difficulties, that's what they pay me for.
Yep.
Yeah,
Okay.
now you can go, Kristen.
Hi, good evening. Thank you so much, Senator Murphy. My name is Kristen Kern. As you heard, I work for the League of Women Voters in the national chapter, speaking to this issue of how to make your voice heard. As you just heard, there are so many different ways to do that. Of course, I'm a little bit biased here, but one great way is, of course, to join the League. To have your voice heard in community. Our voices are always louder in numbers, and so speaking out in a group is always a great way, I think a great start to ensure that your voice is heard on important issues that matter to you or your organization. And there are numerous ways to reach your member of Congress. I work primarily at the federal level, so I'm thinking of Congress here in DC. You might reach them by calling them, sending them an email, reaching out digitally, virtually, or even through social media now, and sending a letter. Those are all still valid ways to reach our elected officials in Congress. I think we'll get a little bit more into all of those avenues over the course of this evening.
Yes.
Okay. Choo-choo train, I have church bells. It's not on my phone. Okay, well, we have this, okay, Chris, do I need to push something? Okay, good. We have a list of questions to get started with, and I'm sure Terry has some that have come from the public. But let's start off with this. I know a question that comes up very often is, if somebody is not your constituent and they write to you, what happens with that?
Well, for myself, I answer every email, every letter. Oh,
Yeah.
go back. Okay. I answer every letter, every email, regardless of where it comes from. However, they're not the first response. They get lower, people that live in my district have priority. So I will answer every letter. I know there are some legislators that don't address constituents that are not within their district boundaries, but I do answer everyone, but it's not the priority in my office.
Kristen, do you have anything to add to that?
Well, I will add, as a resident of the District of Columbia, I don't have any representation in Congress. So when I reach out to members of Congress, especially about an issue like DC statehood, I am reaching out to folks who do not directly represent me. So there are some situations in which that is the case, but for the most part, we recommend folks liaise directly with their members of Congress. They're going to be the best place to start when you have an advocacy ask.
Okay, we have a question here from online. It says, Congresswoman Murphy, how effective do you think participation in rallies are, either for local or national issues?
So first off, I'm just at the state Senate level. I really have no desire to be in Washington at this point in time. So I'm really content with where I'm at the state Senate level. But I think the whole point of rallies is rallies get press. And press, anytime that you can get particularly in the Chicago market, because it's difficult for us to get anything we do outside the city of Chicago in the Chicago market press, but a rally will get the press. And then that raises your voices even more. So I think that's the really important part of going to rallies. And then in a rally, you don't want it to just be me and my three, family members. You want to have groups of people at the rally, because then that looks like a lot more force and it looks like a lot more voices supporting it. So that's what makes rallies so impactful. Does it change policy? Perhaps down the road, but it gives you that press you need to escalate your voice.
Kristen, you're living there in the capital of all rallies. What do you have to say about that?
Yeah, I'll add, of course, media attention is a huge element of rallies. It's also, if you're in a leadership position of your organization, a great way to build your base of supporters, drawing out excitement and enthusiasm to an event, typically in person, can help you add folks to your cause, to help add individuals who share your passion to support on an issue, which is always important.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It does help your members feel empowered. And that's really important to keep people engaged in your organizations or whatever cause you might have.
Okay, ladies, I'd like both of you to answer this. What is the best way for a citizen to find out who represents them, both at the state or federal level?
Kristen, you want to start?
Sure.
That's your turn.
Sure. I think the first step is to Google it. There are a ton of different organizations like the League who have, as we do on our website, a tool that lets you put in your address and find the folks who represent you, as well as at the federal level, just the House of Representatives website or the Senate website helps you find your members of either of those chambers. So I think just getting started with a simple Google search will direct you to any of a number of sites that have a embedded tool that direct you exactly to your members at the federal level.
In Illinois, we use an ilga.gov website, ilga.gov, and that has everyone's contact information, both their Springfield offices and their district offices. It also tells you every committee that they're on, our whole schedule for the entire session, and importantly, every bill that is being considered in the legislature at that time. But also, if there are still some people that don't like to use a computer, the local newspaper usually always prints the name of every elected official. And if you go to your library, they will definitely have the information on where you can contact your elected officials as well. Because I know there's still some people that don't, believe it or not, that aren't using a computer. My mom.
The League of Women Voters of the Palatine, Barrington, and Schaumburg areas has a button on the front page of our website that'll help you find who your representatives are. So,
All right, it's just we're looking right up your noses, and
good, thank you.
let's fix that.
Appreciate that.
Much better.
Good. Well, what should be the first step if someone wants to reach out to their representatives? is there a way that they should determine whether they should be reaching out to their state or their federal Senate maybe, or representatives? And what would be the first step for them to take?
So for me, any issue that doesn't have to do with Social Security, with Medicare, those are the two biggest phone call areas that I get. Those are all federal issues. And what we do then is we connect someone with their federal representative in that particular area. But anything below that is usually can be a state issue. And so for me, the best way to reach me is probably still a phone call. I know everybody likes to email, but sometimes if we're not in district or if we're really swamped in the legislative cycle, those emails don't get answered as timely as I would like them to. If it's an emergency, I have staff to go through them every day, but I like to then also know what people are saying. So I review them after my staff review them. And so I do go through every email that I receive. And based on my schedule, if it's not an emergency, it might be a couple weeks, unfortunately, before, and I'm just being totally honest, before you get a response. A phone call, if you have a problem, will elicit an immediate resolution for your problem. My office, if someone has an issue, we have a standard that in less than 2 days, your issue will be resolved. But if it's just a comment on a bill, like I would like you to support or oppose, sometimes we wait until we see, does that bill make it out of committee? Does it even make it out of our assignments committee to get assigned? So we might want a little more information, and that's where that longer up to 3-week period of time could come in, because we want to make sure that we give you the most accurate and the most current information as possible.
Some of us are aware of a process.
Oh, wait, Kristen, what do you think?
Kristen, yeah, I'm sorry. Yes, pop in there.
Well, I might not have as good of a perspective as your directly elected official here, since I'm not actually on the receiving end of these calls and or emails or other forms of communication. But I would say we do most commonly direct our members to send email because I think it's the easiest for us to encourage folks to do. In recent decades, folks have been less inclined to pick up the phone and simply call their member of Congress, although being up on the Hill in DC, I see in every office we're in, somebody picking up the phone. They are there answering the phone all day long during business hours. So it is certainly an effective way to get in communication with your office. Find the phone number on your elected official's webpage and give them a call. As the senator said, that's still a great way to get in touch. And we know offices take down all of the conversations that they have with constituents and pass them along to the member of Congress. So still a great way to get in touch.
Okay. Kristen, what kind of effects and results do you think typically come from like postcard writing campaigns? What have you seen with that?
Yeah, I think just like any other means of communication, offices are kind of looking at the numbers. They're trying to put their finger on the pulse of their district, of their constituency, to determine how to best navigate the views of their constituents, because primarily for most elected folks, their goal is to get reelected. And so ensuring that you are following the directive of the people who put you in that office can often be one of the best ways to ensure that happens. Voters are educated and aware of how their legislator is voting on the issues. They're watching, and so those postcard campaigns, as a means of connecting with your member of Congress, are a reminder to our officials that voters are watching.
Okay, well, along that same topic, we have a question from the audience about how effective are mass emails or probably postcards that are identical in persuading a legislators to change their mind or to take action. You know, lots of times we have a form letter or a template? How effective is that? Or is it just annoying?
Well, after you read the first one and see this, you can see the trend coming. However, we pay attention to the numbers. So if you get a lot of numbers of those postcards, it resonates with everyone. But not only that, the first thing we do when we're in a committee and a bill is presented, we have a little tab that's called a witness slip. And on that ilga.gov website, you have the opportunity to file a witness slip, which is basically an electronic postcard that goes to that committee directly to that bill. That is the first thing that we look at when we sit down to review a bill. And the chairman 99% of the time announces right at the beginning, these are the number of proponents and these are the number of opponents on a bill. And that resonates with a lot of people. And you read through and you can just file it as self, you can file it from an organization, you can file it anyway, but that really serves as an electronic postcard that's right there in front of us. You also can still send postcards to our office. Those again, sometimes get a little more delayed response because usually they come when we're in session and in all honesty, you get a form letter back on the postcards.
Witness slips are on my list of questions here. How do you suggest, both of you, I'd like to hear from both of you on this. How do you suggest that people who are interested in what's obviously probably the most effective way to make your voice heard, how do they get on the mailing list for witness slips?
So in the Illinois Senate, we don't have a mailing list to get on for a witness slip. The onus is on the individual to pull up the website and do that. However, every legislator has a website that you can sign up for their emails and then get their monthly newsletters or whatever correspondence they might send out automatically. So you can sign up on someone's newsletter to get that information. And everybody does their newsletter different. Some might just have it in past tense. Some might have a survey. Some, it's just a whole vast network of different things that you'll see as many people's websites and emailing lists that you are on. And you can sign up for everybody in the General Assembly's email list if you would like. The witness slip, though, is something that Barb shaking her head like, no. But the witness slips are something that you have to self-generate. And does Congress have witness slips like that? I don't even know.
Okay, Kristen, anything to add?
No, I don't.
Okay, well, if you find a way to be on a list for witness slips, or you find a way to learn about what they are, it takes literally less than 5 minutes. You fill in the blanks and you hit send. And if you know how your computer auto populates your name and your address, boom, it does it. So it literally is a no-brainer. So once you get in the habit of doing witness slips, it is a pretty easy process, and it takes way less time than mailing a postcard or sending an email. So look into that if you're interested in really doing some advocacy. Kristen, do you think there's anything particular happening right now in which we should all be reaching out to our representatives? Where should we begin?
One thing.
We have plenty of time.
Yeah. Well, so right now, and again, my perspective being from the federal level, our members of Congress are on recess. So they go home to their home districts, and whenever that happens, we encourage league members, advocates, anyone who has is passionate about a specific issue that can be worked on at the federal level to go to those district offices, meet with their members of Congress while they are home. Right now, we are encouraging folks to focus on a couple of topics, primarily focusing on right now the state of our democracy, encouraging Congress to use its constitutionally given powers to check the executive branch. We have been watching and documenting executive overreach in the form of executive orders recently as just this afternoon. An executive order that was issued by the Trump administration that would require documentary proof of citizenship in order to register to vote. This is very different than our current process and effectively is an executive attempt to amend legislation, which is Congress's job and should not be done by the executive branch. So we are deeply urging our membership and all concerned advocates to head to their district offices, set up meetings, go to town halls with their members of Congress, and let them know that it is Congress's job to serve as a check and balance to the executive branch. And our government functions when the three branches exert the full degree of their constitutionally given powers.
Okay, so Laura, on that same topic, is there anything that our state legislators can do to weigh in on topics at the federal level?
So, can I just, we have that same bill that was introduced at the state level as well. However, that is not going to move anywhere, because because we don't believe in it. It's pretty easy. The majority just does not believe in that. That means you and I would have to go produce our birth certificates to go and register to vote. Every single person that's voting would have to produce their birth certificate. So that's just something that the General Assembly, majority of the General Assembly just does not believe in. Well, how do we advocate to the federal level? Because, you know, we receive a significant amount of funding from the federal government. So we have very close contacts with them to ensure that we're going to get our federal funding, of which right now we're a little nervous. So if we start with the disbandment of the Department of Education, you know, we fund most of education on property taxes in Illinois, but all of our special education comes from federal dollars. Every bit of special ed is funded on federal dollars. So if we don't see that money, or if it goes through the Department of Insurance, or if it goes through HHS and there's all these additional hoops, we're not sure how we'll get the money. Right now, we have had to file lawsuits. We have a number of EPA programs and projects that were already approved, and Congress had signed off on the appropriations, but they're frozen right now under this administration, and they're not administering that money. Well, that's certainly a breach of Congress's authority. So we would also engage the Attorney General to file suit against the federal government. I think, unfortunately, the only one that's going to win in all this are the lawyers, because you're going to need more and more lawyers to just do the basic actions of government. But that's another way that we communicate. We also reach out and have a great line of communication with our congressional delegation from Illinois. And we're able to tell them, you know, what our needs are. They often know, and that's the good thing. Our federal delegation already knows many of what has been allocated from the federal government and what we should get, where there's a bridge that might have been appropriated money and that's stalled. The MWRD right now, Metropolitan Water Reclamation District, does a lot of flooding abatement. Their projects have been frozen. So we're already seeing a significant number of programs that have been frozen that the Attorney General is filing suit on.
So let me paraphrase a question here from one of our online viewers. So do you, the question is, how closely do state legislators interact with their federal delegation? For example, if we feel that our federal reps are not sufficiently responsive, is it helpful to call our state reps and ask them to help communicate concerns to the federal delegation?
You can, but we already have a great line of communication with them. I have all of their cell phones. I call them, we text each other all the time. So we're really in good communication. I would say, you know, in some areas where it would be helpful is in other parts of the state where we don't have the same relationship with our congressional delegation, to email and send them postcards to know, like, this is already going on. And so we need your help to help free up the money. And that's mostly Southern Illinois. The delegation from Southern Illinois is really the ones that probably would love to need, I don't know if they love to, but they need the postcards.
So that's something that we could look into doing. Yeah. Look up who's down in Southern Illinois,
Yep.
randomly send postcards. Back to witness slips. We have two questions regarding witness slips. And one of them is, can you submit more than one witness slip for a particular bill?
Oh, absolutely.
So you can do the same witness slip like over and over and over?
You can, but
They'll figure it out.
something, yeah, and they'll get deleted. Somebody will go in and monitor it and they'll delete them. And sometimes if you make a mistake, which happens, you know, because it's the first time you're doing, if you meant to be an opponent and you accidentally put it in proponent, then you can just file the opponent one too. So, you know, it happens. You can file multiple. So if you want, and there's no limit to how many bills a day that you can file on. If you want to go through and, you know, do 100 bills that day, there's no limit of how many you can enter on one particular
Sounds like a good project while you're sitting in front of the TV doing busy work. Cammie, did you have a question?
Our next draft in democracy is on going out.
Oh, wonderful.
Yes. What Cammie is referring to is the league has a program called Defend Democracy Drop-ins. And we meet usually at the Palatine Library. Oh, this one's at Barrington? Okay. And it's about a very quick thing where we get instructions on what the issue is and how to communicate about it. And we take action right then and there. Do you want to talk about it real quick? Or is that close enough?
Yes.
Okay, so again, look at the league website, Defend Democracy Drop-In. Anybody is welcome to come. It's not just for league members. We have a question for Kristen here, also about witness slips. Kristen, could you speak about league in action? You can ask for alerts for witness slips through there. Okay, can you explain that, please?
Sure. So this is a tool that we have. It's an app you can use on your phone. Helps you connect with league actions that we are taking. It's we'll send out notifications about any number of actions, whether it's a rally you can attend, an advocacy action you can take. Again, from the federal level, we'll send alerts to folks when there's an opportunity to encourage their member to vote a certain way. If there's a vote in Congress coming up on a bill that we are interested in, we use this tool for a number of different occasions to communicate with folks about how they can engage on issues that are important to the league.
Okay, if somebody has an idea, and you can both address this, if someone has an idea that they think should be law, what steps do they need to take to turn it into a bill? Kristen, why don't you start from your aspect, and then Laura can come in.
Sure. So the first step is we typically talk about it as finding a champion. So we find a champion that's a member of the legislature, someone in the House or the Senate who can sponsor this bill. It's probably somebody who has experience on your issue, who you think might be very interested in continuing to carry the torch on that issue. Maybe they have sponsored similar legislation in the past. They have a clearly demonstrated history in support of your issue. So you might kind of start to look through voting records, have conversations with offices, understand who would be passionate in the legislature about your issue to help you lead that bill, and then make a pitch to them, ask them to introduce a piece of legislation on that issue. Maybe you just go directly to your member of the legislature and ask them if introducing a piece of legislation on the issue that is of interest to you is something that they would be willing to do, because ultimately they are going to be the one that will have to determine how much of an investment is made to actually see the bill through. And then, of course, there are many steps beyond that, but actually getting the bill introduced requires you to find a good champion for that piece of legislation.
And we work the same way in the state. I can give you a real life example. I was giving a presentation at Oak Grove High School, the District 214 high school. And a young man called me in the back of the room after I was done. He said, "Hey, do you know that those of us that live in unincorporated can't use the library? Because we have to pay $250 per family member in order to use the library because they're not in districts." So when you think about that, we want to do everything we can to have kids access libraries, right? So then we worked on a bill that said that it's called, uh, oh, what was it? Kids Read. And we worked on a bill that said that any library, regardless of where a student might be, someone under the age of 18, could take that and allow them to utilize their library. So kids now throughout the state of Illinois can go to any library without having to pay to use the system. And then, God bless, the Secretary of State came out with a grant to all the libraries that said, hey, we'll cover the cost. So the libraries are whole. The Secretary of State already was allocating money. It was just meant now to then plug that hole so that there was no cost to any library to allow kids that were now outside the district in an unincorporated area to access the library.
So what comes into my mind hearing that story is that you would think that that would be a no-brainer. Was it a no-brainer to get it done, or was it a lot of work?
Well, first off, there was a reluctance even from libraries of who's going to pay for this. They were not the Northwest Suburban libraries that said that. There were some other areas that asked about the financial aspect, and that's a real concern depending on how many people you might have utilizing it. So once the Secretary of State was that, then it passed on it was a bipartisan, bicameral support, and it frankly sailed through the legislature and the governor signed it with no problem. But we do most of our work in committee. And I'm sure in Congress, there's meetings behind the scene, there's committee. That's really the whole point of committee, is to hash out all those details. And then when we go to the floor where the whole body would vote on it, typically in the Senate, at least, bills go through pretty quickly. Everybody has a good idea of what their position is. And, we don't get a lot of press coverage. So only sometimes if someone feels that they have to make a speech for their constituency or the Springfield press. Other than that, we just really pass bills pretty, unimpactful. And the Senate president always likes to say that the Senate is boring and boring is good. Boring is a good place to be. Now, the House chamber is a little bit more raucous. And probably operates a little bit more like what we see the federal government operate. They have a lot more opinions. They have double the amount of people in the chamber. So they have a lot more opinions that people like to weigh in it.
All right, this is a question for Laura. Kristen, if you have something to add, please do. I know many people say, well, I don't need to write to Senator Murphy or Congressman Kristen Murphy because he's already doing what I want him to do. So they don't need to hear from me. Do you need to hear from us, even if you're doing what we like?
I like to hear from people because first off, if they think differently, you want to know what they're thinking, and different ideas are not bad. Different ideas help sometimes make a better product. You might have an idea that someone hadn't thought of, and we can incorporate that. And often that makes a better bill. And then if you like what I'm doing, there's never a bad thing to reinforce that and let us know that we're on the right path, that you're supportive of that. And yeah, it's just a win-win all the time when we hear from constituents, because then we know what you're thinking.
Kristen, anything to add?
Couldn't have said better.
Okay. All right, here's a good question. What is the most common myth about how legislation works?
Okay, I could start. In Illinois, we have supermajority Democrats in both branches of our legislation. of our legislator. And people think we just ram bills through, that it doesn't matter what anybody, and that could not be farther from the truth. We reach across the aisle on almost every bill. We incorporate both sides before we make a final decision. Sometimes bills have to pass on a partisan basis, and it's not because the other side just is totally opposed to it, but they may have a constituency that is much more vocal on one area. So we incorporate everybody's opinions. We do not ram legislation through. That's a great talking point, though, that legislators use if they didn't support something, because that always plays well, usually to the base. Oh, I didn't support it because, so that plays well to the base, but that's not really what happens.
Kristen, anything?
I think so.
Not so much.
One thing that comes to mind that I learned years ago, early in my career, is that unfortunately legislation doesn't always pass simply because it's good legislation. It can be, I know the example, it's very good, heartening to hear that the example about allowing students access to libraries was able to pass with bipartisan support. But good policy isn't the only thing that a bill needs to be in order to pass. You need a lot more. Obviously, there is the role of politics, parties who are pretty diametrically opposed on a lot of issues, often having to work together to pass a piece of legislation, even if it's something that we have some agreement on. It can still be difficult to get a bill passed, even when there is bipartisan support for it. It has to get scheduled on the calendar. That's in federal Congress, solely in the hands of the majority leadership. If the majority leadership, which is just a small handful of people, doesn't want to see that on the agenda, it's not going to get scheduled and it's not going to get a vote, even if it would pass. So there's always a lot more going on than simply good legislation versus bad legislation.
That's very interesting
That's
to hear.
Very good point.
Yeah. Okay, now since we primarily speak with your staff, Senator, if we call your office, what is their role and how do you work and hear from them? How do you interact with them?
Sure. And that's very true, because even when I'm in district, I might be out someplace at a meeting somewhere. So my staff is usually the people that you have that immediate interaction with. However, we communicate almost in real time. If someone has an issue, they let me know. Even when it's the if some group decides to send the thousands of postcards in, we we have a software system that counts for every single correspondence that comes into our offices. So at the end of every week, I get a report on what the issues were, how many phone calls came in. So even if it's not an emergent problem, if it's something that, there's postcards, 1,000 postcards come in on this or that issue, then I'll have that data on a weekly basis. And then I have staff in Springfield as well, that when we're in Springfield, it's real-time communication too.
Kristen, do you have any suggestions in dealing one-on-one with staff when you get them on the phone?
Oh, of course. I think we have a couple more questions that might get to it more in depth, but like when you're preparing to have a conversation with a member of staff, there are a lot of pieces of information that you want to know ahead of time. Having a sense of where the legislator stands on an issue, where they've voted in the past, what their priorities are. All of those are going to be really important before you go into having a conversation with a member of staff, to make sure that you are showing how knowledgeable you are on an issue, and can answer their questions to help guide the office in ideally the direction that you are hoping in your advocacy conversation. So there's a lot of homework that we encourage folks to do before going into a meeting with staff.
And I think that's the difference between federal and state. There's so many more constraints on the Congress people's time and senators' time and mostly you get their staff in a meeting. We tend to negotiate ourselves on a bill, whereas you tend to have their staff more at the federal level, right?
Okay, I just got two postcards with variations of the same question, and I think both of you can address that, and that will probably end up being our last question. How does lobbying work?
Oh, that's a really good question. So maybe that could be another myth that, because I got to tell you, lobbyists serve a role. Particularly, so they're engaged, someone engages the lobbyist, and let's say that it's, a recycling plant. And so the lobbyist is engaged by the company that wants to increase recycling. Now, we in the Senate alone this year had over 3,000 bills. There is no way that you can know every aspect of a bill. So a good lobbyist will come in and tell you, here are the important things in my bill. This is what we would like to happen. And then they'll tell you, and here's the opposition. Now, the key being a good lobbyist. A good lobbyist is going to tell you, here's the opposition, here's the points that you're going to be countered with, here's where there could be a problem. Some lobbyists like to omit information. And then those lobbyists don't often make it back in your office many times because you control who will come into your office and have a meeting with you. So those that choose to omit information usually don't ever get a second meeting with me because, I want all the information. You still form your own opinion, but they give you a snapshot. And then someone will come in that's opposed to the bill and say, this is why recycling will be bad for the waste haulers. And because everyone has their own special interest, right? And so the lobbyist serves all that. And then you hear from a host of different lobbyists on one bill. Sometimes we refer, I'll tell you, when gaming is in the General Assembly, whenever there's a gaming bill, we call it a WPA bill. Remember the WPA? That means everybody works. They hire every lobbyist in town to try and support their arguments. And those that doesn't have a lot of meaning because you know that everybody is coming to present that. And we then recognize all those postcards we've received on an issue, where our constituency is on an issue, and then you vote that way.
Yeah, lobbying at its core is persuasion. I'm a registered lobbyist at the federal level. My goal in any meeting with a member or staff of a member of Congress is to persuade them to take the action, usually vote a certain way on a piece of legislation that we are asking them to. I have come to learn that there are two types of lobbyists. There's who you know lobbyists and what you know lobbyists. We consider ourselves what we know lobbyists. We are experts on voting rights as the League of Women Voters. But there are many lobbyists who are who you know lobbyists. They help their client make connections. They form relationships with as many members of the legislature as they possibly can, and then they leverage those relationships to help their clients get what they want. And they're depending on your goal is value in both of those folks, and both again share a goal of ultimately trying to persuade members of the legislature to vote a certain way, to take certain actions in the legislature.
Okay, well, I think that's going to be our last question for the evening. I was afraid we'd run out of questions, but we've gotten some very good questions both from online and here in the audience, and we thank all of you for that. I'd like to just one more thing, ask both of our guests to conclude with their final thoughts on the importance of sharing your voice as a citizen. Let's let Kristen go first.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the importance of sharing your voice absolutely cannot be understated. We are very lucky to live in a democracy where our voices are integral to how our government functions. We're a government by the people, for the people, and our voices are part of that. Our vote is our primary voice, ensuring that we're registered to vote and participate in every election, local all the way up to federal elections. That's the primary way to have your voice heard. And participating in the franchise can never be understated.
Absolutely agree. And then I would add that don't get discouraged. In times we think that things might be falling apart, but don't get discouraged. That's when we have to fight harder. And we have to ensure that our voices are heard even in greater multitudes than what they were before. So I think it's really important to continue your advocacy, continue to reach out to your elected officials and even press harder, because we know that greater voices are what's going to be necessary. That when it's easy to say, I'm too busy. It's easy to say, no, I can't do that. It's always harder to get engaged. But when you get engaged, you have such greater rewards. And this is a time where we need everybody to step up. Democracy is tested throughout history. We've seen that. I think this is one of those times when democracy is again being tested, and we definitely have to rise to the occasion and ensure that. And then in the state, the most pressing issue you're going to see coming up is our budget. And the budget is basically the blueprint of how we operate the state. And so make your voices heard. We're going to have a tough budget year. We're going to make cuts. We're going to have to, trim a lot of things. So make your voice heard about what is acceptable to you and what is not. And then if the feds, we won't go there, but if we're afraid, particularly in our healthcare dollars, but then, that's why we have to also make your voice heard at the federal level, because our healthcare dollars, so much of it relies on the federal government, and whatever they do, it all rolls downhill. So get loud, get really loud.
Oh, that sounds like a good sign you should make. Alrighty, I'd like to thank Senator Laura Murphy and Kristen Kern for their time tonight and for the important work that you both do on our behalf. Our thanks to all of you in the audience, both online and in person. Your time is also valuable, and we appreciate you making the effort to become more educated and engaged as a citizen. Please consider becoming a member of the League of Women Voters. Info on membership and upcoming events are on our website. You probably already know the address by heart by now. www, obviously I don't, lwvpalatinearea.org. We hope to see you at our next 2 civic awareness events. On April 2nd, we will be having sustainability in your community, which will take place here at the library again on April 2nd. And then following that on May 27th, AI and its effects on politics. That ought to be interesting. So again, don't forget to vote on April 1st if you haven't already. And thank you all for coming, and drive safe. Nice to meet you. Nice to meet you.
I don't think she can hear him.
Oh, okay. Nice to meet you. Thank you.
It was Senator Murphy. Sorry, I couldn't turn the laptop that much. Everyone at home, have a safe drive. Kristen, again, thank you so much. Not drive. You guys are at home. You don't have to